This wasn't supposed to happen. A plot that seemed unstoppable has just unraveled in real time. And it's not just another scandal. Senator Mark Kelly is now in a fight for his rights, his reputation, and his future. The very same government officials who once threatened him with military punishment have now retreated. But why? What does it really mean when the U.S. military turns its power on one of its own? Is this the end of a massive overreach or the beginning of something even darker? Keep watching, because the truth is far more complicated than you think. Senator Kelly's clash with Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth isn't just about one person. This is a battle that highlights something far bigger, the battle for control over military power, public speech, and the very rights of those who've served. On the surface, it might seem like a simple legal case, but look deeper and you'll see a trend. Powerful figures threatening those who challenge them only to back down when the pressure gets real. So why is Kelly, one of the U.S. Navy's most decorated pilots, being targeted in the first place? And what happens when someone stands their ground against a government that wields immense power? Stay with me, because what happens next could change everything. Here's the kicker. Kelly isn't just defending himself, he's standing up for the entire military. The case against him? It's built on nothing but empty threats. Pete Hegseth's office warned Kelly with the full force of military law, but here's the twist. The Department of Defense has now quietly backed away from every single threat they made. Why? Because they knew they didn't have a leg to stand on. As Kelly points out, if they had the goods, they would have taken him to court. But they didn't. This is about intimidation, not prosecution. And here's what's truly staggering. What happens when the military and the government throw their weight around only to realize they can't back up their claims? The system is broken, and Kelly is the perfect target in their game of power. But it doesn't end there. This isn't just a single incident. It's part of a much larger pattern. We've seen it before. When those in power feel threatened, they go for broke. And what's even more chilling, they often escalate the situation beyond reason. Take a step back and look at the bigger picture. This isn't the first time a government official has targeted a military veteran for speaking out. Remember how quickly the stakes were raised when Hegseth threatened Kelly with court-martial and punishment? Yet now we see the same government retreating under pressure, making empty threats. Why? Because it was never about the case. It was about silencing dissent. What happens when the very institutions meant to protect us start using their power to crush anyone who dares to challenge them? This isn't a one-off incident. It's a warning shot. Here's where it gets even more disturbing. Hegseth isn't just targeting Kelly. This is part of a broader campaign to intimidate anyone who's ever served. The contradictions are glaring. On one hand, Hegseth and his team talk a tough game, claiming Kelly is undermining military order. But on the other, they've walked back every single one of their harshest threats. Why? Because deep down, they know they don't have the evidence to back it up. This isn't about law, it's about power. When military figures like Kelly speak out, they're challenging the status quo, but it's not just the military at risk here. It's every veteran, every service member who dares to stand up and say, I won't stay silent. What's happening now is the first wave of a much deeper, more dangerous precedent. In the last few days, everything has escalated. First the threats, then the retreat. But now, something even more alarming is starting to unfold. Senator Kelly is being dragged through a legal nightmare with no real charges, just a smear campaign, and it's not stopping there. The longer this drags on, the more it exposes the cracks in the system, cracks that shouldn't be there. Behind closed doors, there's a growing sense of panic. With every public misstep, the military's credibility slips further, and now they're desperate to make an example out of Kelly, if not for the facts, then to prove they can still control the narrative. What happens if this continues, if this is the new normal, where any high-ranking officer or public figure can be destroyed on a whim? What does that say about the future of American democracy? Now let's talk about what this really means for everyday people, because this goes beyond politics. The ripple effect of this case is felt by every military veteran, every retiree, and anyone who values the freedom to speak out. If the government can target someone like Kelly, a decorated war hero with decades of service, what does that mean for ordinary citizens? Imagine the fear that starts to take root when people realize they can be punished, not for breaking the law, but for challenging the people in power. This isn't just an attack on one man. It's an attack on everyone who's ever served. And it's a reminder that we all stand to lose something if this kind of power abuse becomes the norm. If this feels familiar, say so in the comments. We all know what it's like to face pressure for speaking out, whether it's at work, in our communities, or on the national stage. Now let's dig deeper. This isn't just about one isolated case. What's really happening here is a breakdown of the very systems that are supposed to protect us. Behind this drama, there's a bigger mechanism at play, a system of power, leverage, and fear. The military is supposed to defend our freedoms, not use its power to intimidate those who challenge authority. But when a powerful figure like Pete Hegseth uses his position to attack a retired officer for speaking the truth, it reveals a lot about how these systems work. The system isn't built to protect those who speak out, it's built to protect those who hold the power. And that's the chilling part. We've seen this before. When those in control use spectacle and intimidation to silence dissent, they don't just weaken the voices of truth, they make it harder for the system to function the way it was intended. So, what's next? We stand at a crossroads. On one side, we could see this case fade into the background, another political dust-up that blows over once the attention dies down. But on the other, this could be the spark that ignites something much larger. What if the power dynamics in Washington are shifting, and this case is just the beginning? Imagine a future where more and more high-ranking military figures are targeted for speaking out, where legal threats and intimidation become the new normal. The other possibility, the system breaks under the weight of its own corruption, and we start to see real pushback, not just from Kelly, but from the people who still believe in accountability. The next few weeks could make all the difference, and right now the ball is in the court of those who are willing to fight for a fair system, not just one that works for the powerful. Here's the real takeaway. This is more than just a legal battle. It's a test of whether we as a country are willing to stand up against abuse of power. Kelly's fight is far from over, and what happens next could set a powerful precedent for generations to come. But here's the question. Are we going to let this moment pass, or are we going to demand accountability for those who misuse their power? This is the type of story that demands we stay alert, because the next move could change everything. If you want to stay ahead of the story and see how this all unfolds, make sure you're following, because the fight for our rights is just beginning.